But I mean, if we have to speak, I guess.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. We are the Jason Mars fan club, and today we'll be showing you guys HearSay. So to get into it, has anyone been following the World Cup at all? Throw some hands up. Okay, half the class or so. Who are we supporting? Shout somebody out. Who are we supporting? What teams?
U.S.
Okay. Okay.
Brazil.
Little patriotism going on. Okay. Okay. I rock with it. All right. Nice. So the World Cup, right? We got a lot of teams, and it's only a month or so to play all these games, right? As you can see here, the upcoming games for the group stages, right? For each group, the games are played at the exact same time on each day. So for Group A, as you can see, you have Tuesday at 10 a.m. Both games are being played. Same thing for Group B. This structure is done throughout the entire tournament, right? Where we have games at the same time to kind of create tension, create suspense. And when you combine this with the fact that you probably watch college football or maybe some basketball, NBA, MLB, whatever your leagues are, whatever your sports are, there's a lot of information that you're basically tasked with staying on top of to be able to talk with your friends, stay up to date on your favorite players, make bets, however you enjoy the sports that you love, right? And so this is hard, right? There's way too many places to get information, and there's way too many people spewing out their opinions, right? It's really challenging to find who to trust, what sources you can find to trust, and basically where you even just get all this data, right? You have a million different apps do this. You have a million different streaming services as it is. So in order to stay on top of that, we have built HearSay.
So, as we all know, sports has a very, very large following altogether. There's about 5 billion people that enjoy sports altogether. 3.5 billion people enjoy soccer alone. The World Cup being around, you know, that viewing is going to be pretty large altogether. People are always trying to get into new sports and whatnot. And, you know, as mentioned before, it's very, very hard to keep track of every single sport and every single play and every single statistic that's all around. So again, our app is designed to sort of mediate that sort of convention of having to see and view all these different sports and all these different statistics. Our target audience is the American target audience, and so there's about 30 million users within that space. Our project is focused more so on the individual, like American sports that could be recognized, and also a little bit of international sports like soccer and whatnot. So.
So how does HearSay answer that problem? We're going to live in a hypothetical where Elon Musk did not ruin Twitter. That was something we couldn't foresee 2 months ago. But basically, there's all these different news sources and everything out there that would be impossible to stay on top of. But luckily, everybody puts this information on Twitter, the players, the teams, general managers, even the Detroit Free Press and news publications. So instead of having to deal with a bunch of different APIs, we can kind of get everything from Twitter, where there used to be verifiable, reliable sources. And so an issue you might see with Twitter, though, is simply asking, how is Ben Simmons playing? A player who typically gets both positive and negative feedback online. You kind of get very different responses. So the goal of HearSay is to kind of feed through the opinions and the facts and come up with an intelligent answer that just gets you what you need so you can move on.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's where the conversational AI comes in. So think about all the things that a human sports fan has to do. They're consuming news, they're looking at Twitter, and they're evaluating all this stuff. So this is stuff that conversational AI in the past 5 years is getting good at. This is stuff that might not have been thinkable 10 years ago. But all these human tasks can be performed with NLP. So we have some NLU tasks in terms of intent recognition. So, what are you asking about injuries, trades, and so on. We have web scraping. So this is something that you can do to programmatically get all these different kinds of sources and ranking these sources so that the bot is telling you what's important and filtering out all the noise. So here are some models that we've been using. Primary ones have been BART and Camembert. We have Roberta for a Q&A type feature in our bot, and that's something that we're going to get more into.
All right. So now we'll get into a little demo, and if it goes too sideways, we'll switch to a recorded one. But hopefully that doesn't happen. But so an example of a question that we can ask HearSay is, is X injured, right? Is this player injured? So I'll go ahead and do that now using the microphone. Is Neymar injured? And we wait.
Neymar got injured. Brazil won the match. The overall sentiment is negative. The short answer is sad. The most relevant tweet is, why did Neymar have to get injured? Man, smiling face with tear.
Okay, so HearSay was able to get us a pretty good answer just before the class. It was getting a little bit of a better one, but we still take it, right? We asked, is Neymar injured? Neymar is injured. HearSay was able to tell us that, and it has also given us a little update on Brazil, Neymar's national team, by saying that they won the match today. Although the overall sentiment is negative, right, because it's parsing through mainly tweets about Neymar's injury. And then also it's able to grab a pretty relevant data point, right, of a fan who's saying, they're sad about Neymar being injured. Why did Neymar have to get injured, right? And so we can ask another question maybe about a trade, right, or a potential trade, something that hasn't happened yet. Is LeBron going to get traded? And we wait.
Lakers were ready to trade LeBron 2 weeks ago. The overall sentiment is negative. The short answer is Lakers need to trade LeBron. The most relevant tweet is trade LeBron. Face with tears of joy. Face with tears of joy. Face with tears of joy.
So we have not filtered out the emojis from the.
You fun if you don't want to hear that.
We like it. But so this is a hypothetical, right? LeBron hasn't been traded, whereas the past example, right? That's kind of a statement of fact. So it's able to kind of retrieve, right? Neymar is injured for sure. But here, right? Since it's speculation, HearSay is bringing in more of, or it's not giving you a definitive answer. It's using more of the variety of perspectives from fans on Twitter. So as you can see, right, we have Lakers need to trade LeBron. That sounds like a LeBron hater, right? Straight from Twitter. And then we also have the most relevant tweet being trade LeBron with a bunch of laughing faces, which might indicate hey, trading LeBron is a crazy idea, right? So HearSay is kind of aggregating the different perspectives for you and bringing that information right to your feed, right to your eyes, right, or your ears. Another thing, or we can ask more general questions too. It doesn't just have to be about injuries and traded, or a player being traded. We can ask something like, is Lionel Messi the greatest player of all time? And regardless of what it says, this is not true. This one is gonna be wrong, okay? But we'll see what HearSay says.
Lionel Messi is the best player of all time. He's also the most popular football player in Argentina. The overall sentiment is negative. The short answer is Lionel Messi, the greatest of all time. The most relevant tweet is, my favorite player of all time is Neymar Jr. My greatest player of all time is Lionel Messi. My best player of all time is Lionel Messi.
All right, so it looks like we don't handle all caps. Something to look into. But it looks like people think Messi's the greatest player of all time. Again, this is just completely wrong, which is why the sentiment is negative. HearSay is able to identify this as complete garbage. But it looks like some fan out there has Messi being his best player of all time. So, okay. HearSay's gotten some, again, relevant information for a fan trying to stay on top of things. Another thing that we can do with HearSay is we can create a profile and then not have to explicitly mention what player or team we want to ask about now. We can just ask about our favorite teams. So I'll do that now. I'd like to create a profile.
What's your name?
Daniel.
Nice to meet you, Daniel. Which teams do you support?
Manchester United and the LA Lakers.
Ah, a Manchester United fan, I see. Have any favorite players?
Cristiano Ronaldo.
Got it. I've set up your profile.
So now that the profile has been instantiated, and as you can see, there's a conversational flow here. There's a defined kind of state chart, or really a graph, right? That HearSay operates within. And then once you've set up a profile, you've kind of unlocked these intents where you can just say something like, how are my favorite teams doing?
Overall, it seems like the Manchester United team is doing pretty good lately. The Manchester United didn't play any games recently and aren't playing very soon. Here's a quick summary. Portugal will be hoping to join Brazil and France with a win. Guillermo Varela will play right back for Uruguay. Manchester United will win the FA Cup.
Yeah, so these answers change like every minute. So again, we had a little bit better of an answer before, but overall this is pretty good, right? So the Manchester United team doing well, that's true. They've been generally playing pretty well. The haven't played recently and aren't playing very soon because of the World Cup. Club soccer is on break, so that's accurate. We do get a little bit of just general soccer international news, which isn't really targeted there, but the Manchester United will win the FA Cup is 100% true. I can guarantee that. And HearSay gives a great answer there. Am I forgetting any intents? No. Okay. Cool. Just what's that?
Favorite player, if you want to do that.
Oh, okay. I can. How are my favorite players doing? Here I just gave Ronaldo, so we should only hear about that, hopefully.
Overall, it seems like Cristiano Ronaldo has been playing great recently. Here's a quick summary. Cristiano Ronaldo will play for Saudi Arabia's Al Nassr after the 2022.
That is or where HearSay is getting that from is that club, that Saudi Arabian club, has offered to buy Ronaldo for $225 million or euros or something. So that is where it's thinking that Ronaldo is for sure heading out there for. But yeah, I think that'll wrap up the demo, and we'll go back to the slides.
Straight.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to explain what you guys just saw. So here's a system architecture diagram. We tried to include all the different modules that we're using as well as the intents. So we have a front end there, and we're using a speaker. So this is something that's very cool that Google offers called the Web Speech API that is supported by most browsers at this point, and we'll get more into that later. And so we communicate with the backend using HTTP requests. And the backend uses Flask to host the endpoint and has all of these models that we've that essentially we're using Python. So that's how we're kind of tying everything together. So the controller has a zero-shot BART for intent recognition, so that's part of the NLU, and a fine-tuned commenbert for the actual slot extraction. So we have several intents here, asking about injuries and trades. Those were some of the first features we added. This profile stuff, there's a ton of intents in there, such as creating a profile, giving your name, giving your favorite teams and so forth, and also asking about your favorite teams and players. So within that, we have a conversation finite state machine, which handles all of those transitions, and the profile is also stored as part of that state. And we have two shared modules, sentiment analysis and the summarizer, and these are kind of used by everything. So we have a tweet snagger, which is making requests to the Twitter API. We get a bunch of tweets, and then we sort of combine them. So we use the sentiment analysis to analyze those tweets. We're also using the commenbert to do some entity extraction and see which tweets are the most relevant. So we're also ranking them internally, and then we're summarizing them using a fine-tuned BART model.
So in terms of tools, we're using Python, Hugging Face for basically all of our models, including for entity extraction and intent classification. We're also using Flask to do all the API calls and the Google speech to text way. That's how you guys heard that beautiful voice associated with our speech option. And then for front end, solely using React. So in terms of understanding our input, our sort of major way that we're doing this is to essentially take in the speech or text that we the users input into our program, and then parse it into a machine learning pipeline, and then from there uses multiple models to sort of associate what exactly is the sentence asking the program? What particular parts of the sentence are being parsed and need to be referenced in order to make the query actionable? Then the results from said query are sent into this natural language generation, which is essentially whatever our entire program produces.
So yeah, the speech recognition is very cool, and it works very well based on what we found. And so our first attempt wasn't like that, though. We were using a Python library. This is something where we had a Python program, and it was able to do these things using a Python text-to-speech library. And this was not an ideal solution because somebody would have to actually use that Python console to do any of those features. So currently we use the Web Speech API. This is something that has been rolled out over the past few years, and it's supported on all major browsers except Firefox. And it works on Firefox if you use something called a polyfill, which will basically sort of emulate those native APIs and then use some sort of backend to handle all of your text-to-speech needs. The default implementation uses Google Cloud speech-to-text. So this is something that we talked about before, and it turns out that this is kind of baked into all the browsers now, which is really cool. And there's also some good privacy standards baked into that. So all the requests that are sent there are fully anonymized. It's just using we're just essentially leveraging Google's very powerful, very well-trained models to do all of that. And I think that's really cool.
So we use Camembert for entity extraction in order to find entities within our sentences. So you can see here, Jason Mars teaches for Eeks department. Jason Mars is classified as the person. Eeks is the organization. And then similarly, will LeBron James ever leave the Lakers? LeBron James is the person. Lakers is the team. Essentially, this is how we're breaking up our sentences into making sure we're identifying the person that we're trying to search for, and then the team they're actually trying to search for. And we actually retrain on a smaller data set on teams and players in order to actually do the query results and whatnot.
So this is also something that we kind of had at the midpoint presentation. But for intent classification, this is how we kind of figure out if they're asking about a trade or an injury or like the profile stuff or favorite teams, favorite players. So we use this to kind of go between these. Our current system is a zero-shot BART pre-trained model to do the classification, and these are our different intents. Something that we changed since the midpoint presentation is that we used to just have trade, injury. We didn't have these before, but we found that if you add kind of multiple pieces and put ors between them, it can catch more things. So if you say, is LeBron being sold from the Lakers or whatever.
Is LeBron headed somewhere else?
Yeah, headed somewhere else. Then it's more likely to catch it than if it was just traded. And yeah, we had some past attempts trying to fine-tune our own models, but we kind of found out that we didn't have enough data, so we stepped a bit away from those. And then moving on to what we worked on for the bulk of the time past our midterm presentation, was the response generation. So this is a general system overview. We have the input understanding, which was what we just talked about. So we have intent and entities, and then that's going to be passed into the response generation. So first we make a query on Twitter. We get 50 tweets, the top 50 that come from that query. And then with those 50 tweets, the first thing we do is we use a relevancy analyzer now. So pretty much what this does is decide which tweets are most relevant to the question being asked, and I'll talk a bit more about that on the next slide. So that kind of narrows it down to 10 tweets from those 50, and then for those 10 tweets, I think as you could see in our responses, there's a bit of a summarizer, which just summarizes those 10 tweets kind of clumped together. Sentiment analysis, which gives us our overall sentiment, and then the question answer bot, which was this is the short answer. And we found that sometimes doesn't work too well, but when you ask it a pretty direct question, sometimes it's useful. And yeah, that all just goes into the front-end response. So the first thing we use is the relevancy analyzer. So pretty much it's a passage relevancy model, which uses sentence similarity. So if you pass in your question, which we asked before, and then a tweet, it can kind of compare them. I think the one that I used uses cosine similarity, although it is trained, fine-tuned to do this passage relevancy, so it's not just a sentence similarity thing. So you'd pass a singular query and then a bunch of passages, and then it will kind of rank the relevancies in a distribution. So then we're going to take the top 10 of those. So that's kind of what it says here. We get in 50 tweets. we only keep the top 10 most relevant tweets, and this really just helps only keep tweets that actually are going to answer a question. And then the Q&A, this is something that mostly Chaitin worked on, and he's not here. But we're just using a Roberta model, which you pass in a context and then a question, and then that's going to try to get you some sort of answer. In our case, that sometimes doesn't work too well because we're passing in like 10 tweets, which can be pretty long and not include like the exact piece of information that you need to answer the question. But like in this case, you can see that it works very well. So in certain questions work a lot better with this than others. And then finally, the summarizer. This is something that Frankie worked on, but he's not here again. So this is a fine-tuned BART model. And pretty much what it does is it's given a lot of, like a big chunk of text, and it's going to summarize it to condense it. And yeah, for this in our implementation, we just kind of give it those 10 tweets chunked together, and then it creates that like small summary. And that summary has actually been pretty good. Like that was the first thing that the model responds with. And that the reason why it sometimes has some like extra stuff is because we feed in 10 questions. So if they say like in the same tweet that LeBron is going to get traded and something about the World Cup, it might first like include something about the World Cup in its summary, and it can throw it off slightly. But yeah.
Yeah, and then we also had the sentiment analysis model to add to those million other models, which is a Roberta model that will tell us whether the given input text has a positive, negative, or neutral sentiment. And so we fine-tuned this model on our own data set. I wrote a script that like allows us to get a lot of data and train it really quickly. So that helped making the data set, and then also we just feed that in and fine-tune the model. And then there's also a feature that we implemented for these models where, say, we're passing in, 10, before we were trying 20, relevant tweets. We made a batch analysis function that essentially compares the ratios of positive to negative, or positive, or rather neutral to positive plus negative, right? Compares different ratios based on what we're looking for to assess if something is actually neutral or if something is actually positive. And so this was done, of course, to get a more accurate sentiment result. Seemed like today everything was negative, but that's Twitter's fault, not ours. And yeah, so what you saw with the user profiles, right? Users can converse and create a profile with HearSay, and any point after that profile has been instantiated, the user can just get a quick update on their favorite teams and players. They don't need to ask about every single 1,000,001 that they might have added to that profile. And here, HearSay will respond with general news. In the example that we saw with Manchester United, where it said Manchester United hasn't played recently, if Manchester United had played yesterday, it would have told us the score of that game, any notable moments, right? And it'll also get those data points like fan sentiment from Twitter, as well as just general news and updates.
Just keep it brief because we already saw the demo. So the focus of the UI kind of starts as like a search engine type. I have a question, what's the answer? But as you keep asking questions, it comes more like a text message conversation. That way you can see all the answers that you got in the past. You don't have to go back and search for them again. TypeScript for the front end, the speech API we use to kind of get that live transcription of what we were saying. Python in the back end with Flask to receive the requests we're making and get those responses. So in conclusion, HearSay is a one-stop shop for all things sports. Say I watched a football game over the weekend, and after the result, I was a little worried about Ryan Day's job security. So I want to head to Twitter to see what people are saying about whether or not he should keep being the coach for Ohio State. You get things like, let's go, Ryan Day is going to get fired, or are you kidding, you want Ryan Day to be fired already? So let's just head over to HearSay and see what they have to see about it. Kind of ignore all this noise. And as you'd expect, HearSay has a pretty solid answer. Go blue. Any questions?
Questions? Yeah. Does this work exclusively for sports? Like, I use Twitter to catch up on news and politics, so I'm wondering if the summarizer would work in that case.
Nick, oh yeah, go with that.
Well, I mean, so if it doesn't fall under one of our intents, what we do is like we make a general query. So if you were to ask like about a politician, it would make like a general query for that politician and then kind of return a similar thing. Since we have that relevancy analyzer, it's going to try to find like the tweets that most answer your question. So I don't think it, like the question with is Lionel Messi the greatest player of all time? Like that doesn't fall under one of our intents, but it still kind of gives you like a general answer towards like, yeah, but it kind of depends on what's being tweeted as well. If you go out of our intents, it's less likely to be actually answered.
Do you want us to try?
Sure.
All right.
I don't know if we should get into it.
Give me the person.
What's Biden up to?
What's Joe Biden up to? Great. I love that question. That's phenomenal. Have we tested this? No, we haven't.
No one's talking about this. Why don't we tweet it?
Just as we thought. But yeah.
I think we asked something like who will win the 2024 election earlier, and it gave like there's some stuff where like people will tweet it and they'll like latch onto a tweet that might be like a little unusual or eccentric, and then sort of give that as the main result. So
Yeah, this might have just broken
like,
it.
went
Yeah.
outside of this domain, I would say.
That's all.
Yeah. Do you guys ever find like wording bias? Like if I want to say, like the way you word a question changing how it answers it. Like if I want to say, how is C.J. Stroud playing? Versus like, is C.J. Stroud washed?
We ran into that
answers.
a couple of days ago where like starting the question with like how versus just is had a completely different answer.
Really?
But
Oh yeah. Sometimes it's weird. Like you can ask the same question twice, and sometimes it might like miss something.
also,
C.J. Stroud is a Heisman Trophy favorite for Ohio State, but he's not the best player on his team. He's the most overrated player. Overall sentiment is negative. The short answer is most overrated player in the country. The most relevant tweet is, I think C.J. Stroud is my new favorite college football player.
depending on who you ask about, like if you ask about Ronaldo, he gets, I don't know, 1,000 tweets a second or something ridiculous. You know, even just the time it takes to ask the second question, you might get a new 50 most recent tweets. So that also might be affecting it, but
Yeah. So a couple more questions. You said that. Go for it.
This is going to be might sound like a weird question, but did you guys use TweetPy to access the Twitter API?
Which
It's a Python package or library?
it was like SN scrape or something.
Okay.
We were trying to do the original API, but there was limits on it if you didn't pay, and a bunch of API keys, and like some YouTube video popped up. It was like how to get around without. And I was like, oh, cool, and it just like works. Like, all right, yeah, it's like SN scrape or something like that.
We did try TweetPy, and we did open like a Twitter developer account to like use that. It was pretty simple. Have you used it?
Me and him had to make a contribution to it for another class. That's why I asked.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, thank you.
And then go for it.
Yeah. So you say you have like a million like Berts and Barts and stuff. Are you running those all locally, or are you having them in the cloud?
They are no.
Well, actually, it depends. Some of them are local, and then, like, for example, the passage relevancy one, I just make, like, a post request to, like, Hugging Face. So I guess it depends. The ones that we fine-tuned are all local, which is, like, I think a good amount of them.
It's most of them.
Yeah.
It's most of them.
So a lot of them are that's why it's kind of slow.
Any other questions?
All right.
Thank you.
Very nice, very awesome. All right.
This is Shari party. Zero shout Bart. He said zero.
Martians, come on.